Good evening. This is Friday, August 1st, 95 days until the 2008 presidential election. To that topic presently. First, if reporting by the Los Angeles Times today is even remotely accurate, the questions about the Anthrax attacks, which terrified this nation late in 2001, would seem tonight to have boiled down to three. First, was the anthrax sent by just one employee of our own government or more than one employee of our own government? Second, when the FBI missed an easy clue, the unreported spilling of anthrax in the federal repository of anthrax that the suspect did not report, was it incompetence or a cover-up? And third, how, if there was evidence of something askew at our biological warfare lab in Maryland as early as December 2001, why did national news organizations in this country receive supposedly reliable leaks from the Bush administration that the anthrax had originated in Iraq? Our fifth story in the countdown, there is finally a suspect in the anthrax attacks. He worked for the government's anthrax lab, and unfortunately he's dead as of this past Tuesday. His name was Dr. Bruce E. Ivins. The Los Angeles Times reporting this morning, NBC News confirming tonight, that the Justice Department was preparing to file criminal charges against him for the 2001 anthrax attacks. Dr. Ivins dying Tuesday at Frederick Memorial Hospital in Maryland, reportedly after taking a massive dose of prescription Tylenol with codeine. His lawyer today asserting his client's innocence in a statement, quote, "For 6 years, Dr. Ivins fully cooperated with the investigation, assisting the government in every way that was asked of him. We assert his innocence in these killings and would have established that at trial. The relentless pressure of accusation and innuendo takes its toll in different ways on different people, as has already been seen in this investigation. In Dr. Ivins' case, it led to his untimely death." In Frederick, Maryland, his neighbors stunned. But in court documents last month, a therapist saying that Dr. Ivins, quote, has a history of homicidal threats, asking for judges' orders to keep him away from her. In June, another Fort Detrick scientist, Stephen Hatfill, who had been the chief suspect in the anthrax attacks, finally and officially exonerated and receiving a $5,820,000 settlement from the government. After the 9/11 attacks, of course, anthrax-laced letters are having arrived here at NBC News, at the Capitol Hill offices of then Senator Daschle and Senator Leahy, and at the company that owns the National Enquirer. Former Senator Daschle saying today that the FBI owes it to the country to provide some accounting of their investigation and their expectations for a successful conclusion. So far, many more questions than answers remain. The FBI, the Justice Department, the U.S. Postal Inspection Service today jointly announcing that there have been significant developments in the investigation, but confirming only that substantial progress has been made by bringing to bear new and sophisticated scientific tools. At Kennebunk Park, Maine, White House Press Secretary Dana Perino telling reporters that President Bush was aware of the investigation to an extent.
President Bush, over the years, has maintained an interest in this case and has periodically been updated by the FBI director on developments in the case, not necessarily so much in specifics, but in general, so that he can make sure that the FBI continue to work to try to solve the case.
So was he aware that this particular person was about to be indicted?
I think the president was aware that there have been developments, but for me to answer that question would be to comment on the story that is reported in the papers this morning, which I can't do at this moment, so I'm going to have to refer you to the Justice Department for now.
In the wake of the apparent suicide of an alleged suspect in the anthrax attacks, new questions being raised about the extent to which the attacks were used to argue for the invasion of Iraq. On October 18, 2001, a United States senator having raised that very possibility with David Letterman.
How are things going in Afghanistan now?
I think we're doing fine. I think we'll do fine. The second phase, if I could just make it very quickly, the second phase is Iraq. There is some indication, and I don't have the conclusions, but some of this anthrax may, and I emphasize may, have come from Iraq.
Oh, is that right?
If that may be the case, then that's when some tough decisions are going to have to be made.
We're joined now by David Willman, the Los Angeles Times staff writer who broke the newspaper story on the apparent suicide in the anthrax case. Thank you for your time tonight, sir.
Of all potential leads and suspects and a reassessment of all assumptions that have been made about evidence already collected on the chance that perhaps inadequate attention had been paid to those leads and suspects. And I think that hard ground pounding around those principles yielded fruit. And we have yet to see exactly what some of the breakthroughs have been with the advances perhaps in genetic analysis of the anthrax powder itself.
If this Dr. Ivins had first aroused some suspicion, obviously not enough, because he'd failed to notify his supervisors about an anthrax contamination in the lab in which he did his business in late 2001, is there any indication why it took nearly 7 years to exonerate Hatfill and come to the point of being on the verge of charging Ivins?
Well, those are good questions, Keith. Hatfill, by the way, again, we reported in the LA Times in June 29th, in great detail about the rather over-focus on Mr. Hatfill by the Justice Department and the FBI, to the exclusion of putting resources into other potentially promising leads and suspects in this investigation. You refer to that spill and Dr. Bruce Ivins' role in swabbing, in bleaching contamination by anthrax up at Fort Detrick. It turns out, by his word, beginning in December of 2001, he kept it a secret, didn't report it to his supervisors until April of 2002, and yet the final Army report on the incident said that, no one should be penalized here. We don't want to discourage folks from coming forward and reporting accidental spills. So why didn't the FBI or the Justice Department look more critically at that? I think those are important questions to put to them when they're willing to have more of a public dialogue about how they've handled this case.
Is there, in your opinion, having covered this story, having broken this remarkable story today, is there going to be more public dialogue about this, the man and the suspect? More on the many unanswered questions. Let's turn now to Gerald Posner, the investigative journalist and author of Why America Slept, the Failure to Prevent 9/11, who has also long been following this extraordinary anthrax story. As always, sir, a pleasure.
Good to see you, Keith.
There seem to be only two paths we could go down here, and they're both pretty bad. A, this was a man working for the government, and he acted alone for whatever those motives might have been. Or B, this was a guy working for the government, and he didn't act alone. Is there any indication at this point which of those is the likelier path?
No, there's not, Keith. And the frustrating part of this is I hate it as an investigative reporter when a cold case like this is closed by suicide. I've been talking to Justice Department sources today. Let me tell you, they are rushing to wrap this thing up. They want it over with. His suicide, as far as they're concerned, is the end of it. We're never going to know, even if he was the person who was involved in actually pulling the anthrax out and doing it, whether he was part of a larger conspiracy or whether he's just the cutout and today he's dead, because they're not going to pursue this investigation. There's no outcry for it. That's unfortunate. For the sake of caution, and maybe we can do the outcry later, let's proceed down the loner path. What are there theories about what his motive might have been? Could this have been as comparatively contained as the story from Boston 30 years ago? They were going to close at firehouses, and suddenly there was this rash of arson fires, which turned out to have been set by the firemen who did not want to see their firehouses closed. And was this self-protection? Was this self-interest? Could Dr. Ivins have somehow been protecting his own turf? You know, it doesn't appear to be as much self-protection, but those I talked to today who wanted to at least speculate, who had been around the investigation on this, said that they thought it was more a case in which he was somebody who wanted to almost test the quality of this anthrax by actually seeing it in action. Absolutely no doubt about that. From everything that I've done on my own investigation and following up from 2001, I'm now more convinced than ever that there were individuals inside the Bush administration and in the government who wanted the war in Iraq so badly that they decided that if there was something that they could use to push it forward, they would. Anthrax fell into their lap. Even if he is the deranged solo killer, they used it in order to scare this country and say, Iraq's somebody we have to go after, and we did.
And in that context, there would be no rush to find the deranged solo killer.
They could rely on the blunders of the FBI.
Indeed. Investigative journalist Gerald Posner, as always, great thanks for joining us, sir.
Thanks, Keith.
This presidential race